Okay, starting over in a new window because something in the previous stream wasn't working. And it appears to be working now. Okay, so here's the example of Blind Mary, which is the Linda Thomas arrangement from Kansas City area. This is a Turlock Carolyn piece, a traditional piece that I just don't know. So for sight reading, this is an excellent example of something I can try. As I look, she tells me that we're in D major. If I'd look, I would see I have two sharps, which suggests D major, but I'm going to go to the end. And it's also true that I end on a D. That's common in the key of D. I have a lowest note, this D that's on the bass clef, or it would be in the middle of the bass clef, but because we only have the treble clef, which is this one, it uses all these ledger lines to show us that that's the lowest D that's on a hammer dulcimer that's a 1615 size or 1514 size. It's also the low note on a mountain dulcimer. This has stems going in both directions, which tells us we have two voices happening. I called that split bar notation. We do have split bar notation, which means the music is laid out in the beats according to the beats in the time signature. That if I would split this measure in half, I would have the whole first beat here and the whole second beat here. So that helps me. It has a lot of black on this page, and that can make some people very nervous. It doesn't tell me anything about tempo. I know that Turlock Carolyn was a harper, and I know that harp music can go both fast or slow. I never know that for certain just by looking at music. I can see that it has the chords I would expect to be played in a song in the key of D, with one B minor here. She's emphasizing the minorness by using the lowercase m. And you can see that there's no special navigational things. I just get to the end here. It just start at the beginning and go to the end. But the stems up tend to be the melody. This is the way Linda Lau Thompson would also do her music, and that was one of the first hammer dulcimer books that I had. And so the stems down are typically what my right hand is going to be doing. The stems up are typically what my left hand is going to be doing, or at least what the melody is doing. So as I come to play this one, I might come to play it very slowly. So I would probably do something like that and work my way through it. Now let's go back and do the mountain dulcimer one that I was showing you before, but I don't know if it came through. This is Larry Conger's Mountains of Morn, a tune I don't know. There's no musical notation here. It's just tablature. The stacked letters here tell me what tuning is being used. Here's our 100. A quarter note is the same as 100 beats per minute. A quarter note is one of those. I can set my metronome for that. The 3/4 tells me that we're in 3/4 timing. So I'd normally have 3 beats in a measure. I can see them 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3. And the stems are counting the beats, and the beamed stems are like eighth note stems. These little numbers here are measure numbers. They're just telling me what measure. And if I'm playing with another person, this is part of a duet book that they created together, then it's really helpful when rehearsing to everybody be on the same measure when you're working on things. This first measure only has one note in it, but that's because this is a pickup note. And normally at the end of the piece, you'll see the other two beats, which make space for this. That's not the way this one's written out. Now, as I'm going through here, it doesn't tell us what key we're in. We begin on a G. There's no key signature. It's one of the pieces of tablature we don't know from key signature. The last chord is a G, and so I'm thinking that we're probably in the key of G. And as I look through the chords, G, C, A minor, D, G, C, A minor, E minor, these are typical chords that I'm going to hear in the key of G. Now there is the A to the D here is the 5/5 or secondary dominant move, which happens in different songs. But it looks like pretty much this is the key of G. Now there's one thing that gets my attention. These numbers are tablature numbers, but right here, there's a 1+. If I don't have a 1+ on my instrument, I'm going to need to find a different way to play these particular notes. For me, because I don't have musical notation up here, it's going to take me a while to reverse engineer and figure out a 3 is a G, a 1 is an E. So my melody, which on the mountain dulcimer tends to happen on the string that's at the bottom of the tablature, which is the one closest to you, so I'm going to have to do some pencil and brain work to figure out how to redo this. Now that shows up out here. It almost shows up here. There's a different first note, but everything else is the same. And here as well. So I would circle those and say I'm going to have to figure out a new way to do that. The other thing I'm going to do is look at navigation. I'm going to start at the beginning, move my way through. I get here. Oh, there's a navigation sign, a segno, the Italian sign to say this is going to be involved in a repeat of some kind. It's a marker. It doesn't send me anywhere, but this is where I come back to. So I know that wherever I go, I'm going to come back to that at some point. I get to here and it says fine, Italian word for finish. In English, it says fine. I guess if you finish, you're fine. But in Italian, it's fine. And at the beginning, that means I'm going to end here, but I'm not done because there's still 2 more lines of music. So I'll play through those, get to the end where it says dies al fine, dal segno al fine. So I'm going to go I'm going to go to the sign and then finish at the fine. So that's the organization of that particular one. I see, Jim, you have a question here. When does the 16th note become an ornament to the melody? I don't know. It's an interesting question. I don't know that it's a relevant question. That's because it's not based on the measurement that you're using. And you know that if you have a measuring tool and you're asking questions according to your measuring tool, you might get a measurement, but it doesn't answer the question you're asking. There's one more that I want to share, and this is not sight reading for me because it's one I wrote. Oops, I want to move to here first. There we go. Okay, so I'm teaching a class on Advent. Oops. And Doug, you've been seeing this and talking about the version or the landscape orientation here, which has been giving you the blues. In both of these styles, you can see there's musical notation and tablature. Right underneath the melody, before you get to the chords, you can see there is a way to play the melody in a drone style. just playing those single notes. Below that, you can see some chords, and the chords are only changing on the first and fourth beats of the measure, which is common in 6/8 time. Now, the other thing is this says a quarter note is worth 80 beats per measure. A little indication says this is the chorus of the song, and this is where the verses are sung when we get down here. Again, we have fine here, and the DC al fine, da capo, means go back to the head. There's nothing at the beginning to tell us to repeat here, except for da capo, which sends us back up here. And eventually we're going to finish at the fine. It turns out there's 5 verses, which is why that's written here. So we're going to go through this many times in order for all the notes to become part of the chord. All the verses to be played with the notes that are here. Above are some chords. There's some slash chords. Slash chords mean if you're playing with a bass player, the bass player plays whatever is to the right of the chord, or a piano player can be playing that pedal tone, that low note, and just keep it ringing while the rest of the chord happens. It says two sharps. Our last note in the end of the chorus is a D. Our last note at the end of the verse is a D. So we're probably in the key of D. Our last chord is D. So I have a lot of clues for how I'm going to be playing this one. The same thing for this one, a hymn tune, St. Hilary. The drone style melody is right underneath. The 6+ is a 6+ fret. That's a very common one used in mountain dulcimers these days. The parentheses indicate going to the middle string to play those. Now, in a lot of tablature music today, this book, this is from my Dulcimer Friendly Advent book, was written back at the beginning of the 90s. And I was trying to fit everything on one page rather than have many pages. And so having the drone and the chords on the same page, this is the way that worked the best, which meant I didn't have a way of using the tablature to show where these notes are going to be found. The asterisk says if you have an instrument that doesn't have a 6.5 fret, you're going to have to bend the string in order to get that pitch. Now, I'm giving you some navigation things right now. We are not thick in the weeds of learning how to read musical notation, but I'm using these as an example of, I want to stop the sharing. There we go. Using these as an example of how we can pick up music we haven't seen before and navigate. Thanks, Jamie. I'm glad you find that helpful. And Jim, that's a much more helpful getting at the core of the question. What I would say in the one I was showing you is the 16th notes were the down stem accompaniment. So I would play the stem up part just to hear the melody first. In that case, yes, I would ignore the 16th notes. If the 16th notes are part of the melody, no, I can't ignore them. And what they are indicating is because we're in 2/4 time, if this was written in 4/4 time, you might not see 16th notes, you'd see 8th notes. So the meter that's chosen has something to do with what the time value of the notes is going to be inside the music. So I would not just say 16th notes equals bad notes or hard or I can't do those. It depends on the context. So those are some tips for sight reading. The other best tip that I can think of is if sight reading is learning to read music is a goal that you have, then my suggestion is make sure you play something, one new thing every day that you've never seen before. Just pick it up. A lot of us in the dulcimer world have a nice library of resources. Just pick up one of those books, start working through it, put a check mark when you've done it. If it's one that gets your attention, you might put an exclamation point or a star or something. You might want to come back to it. But the whole point of this exercise is I'm going to play something I've never seen before. Don't worry about quality, just worry about doing it. And as you do it, 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, 28 days, you're going to start to find this isn't so scary. The more I do it, the less scary it becomes. Kind of like driving a car, right? First get in, heart's beating fast, sweating, it's hyper vigilant about everything. Now you can even make a wrong turn and not fall apart. I can sight read after about 40 times through. Now, if I want to improve on the tune, that's when I would play it more often. To say I want to learn this tune, I'm going to do more repetitions with the tune. But for simply sight reading and getting the tune as I'm going through, I don't have to perfect it. I just need to play something I've never seen before. And that helps my skills at sight reading. Well, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened because when I restarted the stream, it all worked fine. So sometimes it does that, I guess. We have a new live event studio on Vimeo through which I'm sending this live feed to Dulcimer Crossing. Both of these will be available in the feed in Facebook. They are both archived to the YouTube channel at Dulcimer Crossing, and they're archived in the past events in the live events link when you're logged into the site for workshop and mentor level students. The commercial this week, this is the week of the North Georgia Foothills Dulcimer Festival, their fall festival. And let's see, there are concerts beginning tomorrow night. And if you go to this page, you can see the lineup. Dulcimer Crossing teachers, Karen Mueller, and is in the first night. Aubrey Atwater, DJ Hamoris, Butch Ross, and myself are on Friday night. On Saturday, Nina Zanetti and Aaron May Lewis and Larry and Elaine Conger are all playing. There's a lot of other players, but those particular people are people who have lessons on Dulcimer Crossing. And so we like to highlight where our teachers are playing. All right, you're coming to the bluegrass class. That's excellent. And you're saying you can sight read pretty well. Sometimes you feel like that tool can get in the way of memorization. Aha. Well, then that's a whole nother live feed. How do I memorize? How do I learn to play once I can read the notation? So we'll take a look at that on another one. But for now, that's the end of our time today. And thank you for coming. I will label these part 1, part 2. So if you're looking for the different parts, you can find them in the future. But I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great